So what exactly is LitRPG, and why are so many people talking about it? LitRPG, or literary role-playing game, is a genre that combines the mechanics and conventions of role-playing tabletop and video games and kind of smooshes them together with sci-fi and fantasy books. Now, often they are one where the protagonist is actively involved or engaged in the game mechanics and are attempting to advance through or complete it. Now, many of these mechanics are based on games like Dungeons & Dragons, which break down sort of key physical, mental, or spiritual characteristics into actual tangible point values. Now, the term was supposedly coined back in Russia in like 2013, but the conventions go back way further. The whole trapped inside a video game trope goes back all the way as far as the 1970s, and a lot of those old school tropes have really, spawned a ton of different offshoots over the years, LitRPG being one of them. There are varying degrees of intricacy to the genre, but modern hallmarks often use the breakdown of very tangible stats. Things like +5 to strength or -2 to dex, and often will involve things like status effect, like poisoned or charmed, and almost always involve the collection of loot. This real idea, this tangible sense of progression, the idea of starting off weak and ending up incredibly powerful. Progression is now so much a key part of the genre that progression and cultivation fantasies are their own now distinct subgenres of LitRPG. It is so quintessential to how these books advance the feeling that you are progressing alongside the characters. If you're a fan of role-playing games, either virtually or on the tabletop, then you definitely need to give LitRPG a shot. Now, I will be honest, I had my hesitations at first. When I thought about the genre, when I'd seen some initial stuff about it, I was expecting these like really dense pages that are just like full of these like really robust stat blocks, and it's just pages and pages of descriptions. I'm thinking back to like old school text muds, things that are super dry. But I am so pleased that I could not have been more wrong. And that's thanks to this book right here, Dungeon Crawler Carl by Matt Dinniman. A book that came out in fairly recent years, but that has been defining the genre, releasing just in 2020. And it's one of these books that have received, honestly, just so much hype that I didn't possibly think it could be real. Looking at you, TikTok. But no, it was one of these books that so many people had talked about. I just saw that it got picked up for a TV or movie adaptation of some kind. And I thought, all right, this is finally going to be the time that I am going to give LitRPG a chance. Again, as someone who grew up with video games, with RPGs, as a consummate min-maxer in everything that I play, I thought, all right, this is going to be the time that I give it a shot. And holy crap, does it scratch all the right itches. I mean, it's over-the-top violence. It's gratuitous in so many ways. It's just silly. And at its core, it is a deeply funny book. I mean, legitimately funny, like had me laughing out loud at multiple points. This book is truly something else. And I read it in a single day, sat down the next day, and then just bought the rest of the series. That's how much it impressed me. Now, Dungeon Crawler Carl is the first of many books in a series of the same name. It follows the titular protagonist, GC BWR NW Princess Donut, the Queen Anne Chonk. Oh, sorry, no, Carl. But also Princess Donut, as they attempt to make their way down the 18 levels of the Earth World Dungeon. Now, the book follows the human race at a pretty honestly rough time in its history, aka the absolute worst time, because they basically got hitchhikers guided, essentially. Basically, an alien collective or government known as a syndicate had basically filed claims on it, and the Borant Corporation is the company that is sort of executing that claim for mineral rights, or exotic mineral rights, something like that. But the basic gist of it is, it's not really about that. It's actually about putting on a game show, Dungeon Crawler World, which happens every couple of years. Different corporations run it. And humans, unfortunately, are the unwitting subjects of this particular season. Humans on Earth, because we actually learned that humans are one of many seeded races throughout the universe, and that the universe, in fact, is very, very large. We are very much not alone in this. And that's how the LitRPG mechanics are actually executed in this book. Carl and his lovely, companion, cohort, teammate, Princess Donut, go on essentially this quest to not only survive, to try not to just die, but to make it through all of these different levels as they continue to grow and advance, learn the mechanics of the game. Now, my initial thought looking at this was, oh crap, like they're just going to throw so much information at you. Like there's just going to be so many pages and all this info and item and gears and rules and constraints. And yes, that does happen, but it's presented in such a way that you really don't even care because you just get so invested in every bit of lore and every tidbit. Because while yes, a page may be full of, obscure small things and the difference between, being level 11 decks and level 12, at that moment may not seem like that big of a deal. But Dinniman does such a good job of planting these tiny little seeds that get paid off later. Like a skill point that's put into something on page 200 may come into huge effect on page 400. And you're like, oh my God, that's been thought out for the last half of the book. And because of that, it makes you so invested in all the little elements of it. And it's just wrapped in such a beautiful shell. Like I'll be honest, like the prose isn't necessarily like the best thing you've ever read, probably, but it is just genuinely funny. This is a first-person book that does sardonic humor incredibly well, and the main character sells it. Carl is such a believable protagonist because I think the biggest thing for me is he acts like a reasonable, sane human. I mean, he's angry when he's supposed to be angry. He's upset and frustrated at those moments. But at the end of the day, I think what really sells it for me is he acts how I would act. He looks at this through the lens and the constraints of a video game. How do I win? How do I actually do this? The idea of like looking, at his stats and thinking, okay, how can I progress? How should I be grinding? How should I be maximizing my day? Because that's super important. Because this game is in rush mode. You only have a handful of days to clear a level before it crumbles beneath you and everyone on it dies. Only 13 million humans make it of all the planet Earth into that first level of the dungeon, and they get whittled down quick. The stakes are real. And like I said, there is gratuitous violence. Now, this is definitely not a book for kids. There are some lewd and crude over-the-top jokes from everything from just ridiculous dick jokes to like the AI that's monitoring the game has like a foot fetish, and like that is a legitimate plot point for Carl. We feel bad for Carl. Okay, we'll say that a little bit. But it's done and executed in such a fun and real way that you laugh out loud at multiple points in this book. And what's great about it is it's not necessarily, I've read some of these recently, just like a dude book. And I say that in like the absolute best possible way, because again, while Carl is sort of the protagonist, the character of Princess Donut is done so well. And yes, it's a cat, but like it's just presented in such a great way. And there are so many great female characters in this book to sort of help complement Carl. Like there is not one whiff of misogyny in this entire book. It is just so well balanced, so well grounded. The mechanics make sense. The decisions make sense. No one's way smarter than they should be. But because of the way that Dinniman has set up this world and the metagame, if there is a weird moment of Deus Ex Machina, it actually makes sense because there is like an AI or a producer sitting behind the screen that's trying to make it as ridiculous, as entertaining, as exciting as possible. If something crazy and stupid happens, it's because it's supposed to happen. So because Dinniman has given himself these constraints or lack thereof, it just helps to ground this book so beautifully, where you just kind of smile and accept it because it's badass and cool. And it's like you're sitting around a table with a bunch of friends playing D&D or Pathfinder, just seeing how cool you can make it, because Rule of Cool absolutely rules this book. And I cannot wait to keep reading the series. Like I said, I went out and kept buying them. And again, if you're someone who wants to get into LitRPG, I feel like this is the perfect toe dip into the genre. Because yes, you do have items flashing on the screen and you are kind of trying to keep track of how the different stats and stuff work. But there's all of this bigger world and lore that's being drip fed to you. That you not only are you invested in like the real everyday story of Carl and Princess Donut trying to make their way through the dungeon, but you're also so curious to learn more about the geopolitics and the things that are going on with the government and the different corporations and the game within the game, or I guess outside of the game. And because of that, because of the way these stories are stacked and layered, you just get so invested into these characters, and they are so genuinely likable. And the moments of fear and panic are real because people can die in this. Like the stakes are also legitimately real. So when you combine just good, talking like Abercrombie levels of humor, combined with a world that actually makes sense, as ridiculous as it is in its own context, combined with tropes that we all know and love, put into a space that, again, if you're someone like me who loves RPGs, if you've been playing Baldur's Gate or whatever for the last couple months, this is going to feel right at home and then some. I'm absolutely blown away. This has to be one of my top reads of the year so far. Just so impressed with the quality of this. And there's 5 more books to read. Dinniman has been pumping them out the last few years, so I cannot wait to keep going through this. Again, if you're someone who is new to the genre, wants to try it, wants to explore it, I highly recommend that you start with Dungeon Crawler Carl. It's just freaking great. But that's it. That's a quick overview of what the lit RPG genre is, takes those quintessential video game tropes, distills them down into a book, and gets you invested in the characters as they progress through the story. If you're interested in sticking around on this channel at all, be sure to like and subscribe, hit the bell. It does make a huge difference when it comes to helping to grow this channel. Thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Cheers.